Mbataru. I'm one of the center's researchers. I work closely with Danforth and Shona. Today is really exciting. We are zooming in on CIVICUS Monitor, Tracking World Civic Spaces, webinar. And today we have Sylvia Mbataru, and she'll be tackling this specific topic, and we're really excited to have her. Sylvia's will be discussing CIVICUS Monitor as a cutting-edge research tool built by civil society. The aim of the monitor is to share reliable, up-to-date data on the state of civil society freedoms in all countries. So she'll be really taking a deep dive into this and how the tool works, and also introducing how CIVICUS monitors and giving us a global overview of key civic spaces trends, and also focusing on Africa, on African trends as well. A bit about Sylvia. She's a human rights and public policy lawyer working as a researcher at CIVICUS, where she leads the organization's monitoring and research of civic spaces in Eastern and Southern Africa, Middle East, and parts of Europe. She has over a decade's experience working on human rights and social justice issues, having previously worked at the Kenyan Human Rights Commission as a civic space advisor and on economic and social rights, as well as children's rights prior to that. Sylvia, I'd like to give you a warm welcome to the Center's webinar series. And it's always a pleasure to be speaking to colleagues from our African continent. And to everyone that has joined us, welcome to the Center for Civil Society. I'll hand over to Dan.
Thank you, Andres, for this warm introduction. We welcome Sylvia to this Center for Civil Society's special webinar on CIVICUS. We're looking forward to hearing how the CIVICUS Monitor works and how we can use it as a tool to empower the civil society. So I'll just lay some ground rules. I'll be facilitating this session. So I'll give the speaker 30 to 40 minutes so that she can share with us her work at CIVICUS. And I will take questions at the end of the session. So you can also put questions there by the chat box. If you want to engage with the speaker, please do so by raising your virtual hand, and then we'll give you a platform so that you can engage with the speaker. Thank you so much for joining us today, and thank you, Sylvia, for making time to come and share your work with us. I'll just give you the platform now, and then maybe you can just give us your presentation or your talk on the monitoring system that you are using at CIVICUS. Thank you so much.
Okay, thanks, Danford. Yeah, so I think I can start. I will share a PowerPoint presentation. In case I go too fast, please don't hesitate to ask me to slow down a bit. So let me share my screen.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you.
Can you see it? Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can see it.
All right. Okay, great. So we can start. So thanks again for having CIVICUS, and specifically the CIVICUS Monitor, to come and speak to what we do and how we collaborate with civil society. It's always exciting to share not just findings, but also our methodologies. So the CIVICUS Monitor is a department, rather is a team within CIVICUS, and our work is mostly basically just documenting trends, and the situation of civil society across the globe. We are a team of researchers. We are about 7 or 8 right now. And we try to monitor and document civil society trends within 197 countries and territories. So what we do, basically, the CIVICUS Monitor, as Dan further alluded, is it aims to provide a comprehensive assessment of the conditions for civil societies within countries and over time. So as much as possible, we try to cover as many countries as we can. Right now, we're covering 197 countries and territories. Although you'll find that sometimes in some countries, our information is not as up to date as it should be because of one, we're not that big of a team. And then 2, there are countries that normally have quite a bit of challenges when it comes to finding information inside there. So with regards to this, what we monitor, we basically monitor civic space. And for the CIVICUS Monitor, we define civic space as the respect in law and practice for the freedoms of association, peaceful assembly, and expression. And then with not just how these 3 rights are being respected, but also how the state is providing the duty to protect this, is what is doing to protect these 3 rights. So in order for us to document these rights, we developed the CIVICUS Monitor, which is an online platform that I will show you on the screen in the next slide. So we be able to cover the 197 countries and to cover civic space on a global scale. We have over 20 organizations with research expertise from around the world who we joined forces with an aim to provide the evidence base on civic space and trends. So these 20 partners are, located across the globe. And usually what we do, we work with regional networks. So for example, in Eastern Africa, we have a regional network that covers all the countries within Eastern Africa. And then the same applies to Southern Africa and then all those other sub-regions across the globe. And then what each of these research partners does is they provide us with updates on civic space, regular updates on civic space within the countries that they cover. So the idea is that by using regional networks, these regional networks then have national networks that form the regional networks. And through their national networks, they're able to get information which they then share with the CIVICUS Monitor in form of the updates. So once we get the updates, we curate this, the information that we get, do the proper verifying of this information, and then we then prepare updates on that specific country. So each country ideally is supposed to have an update every 2 months, so that it's a regular number of updates per country. So every 2 months, and a country should have at least one particular update. Once we verify this information, we publish it on the CIVICUS Monitor, and these updates provide basically narrative and qualitative information about that particular country. And then with this narrative and in qualitative information, we get the trends of that particular country, and then we're able to use that for things like advocacy, which is more evidence-based, and provide also collaborations with civil society wherever required. So basically, as I mentioned before, this is what we do. We cover basically these 3 rights: freedom of peaceful assembly, freedom of association and expression. And then overall, we look at what the state is doing to protect these rights. So this could be in form of laws and policies, in forms of practice. What exactly is the state doing to either respect and fulfill the right, or to actually come forward as being violators themselves. So, so this is the landing page of the CIVICUS Monitor. In case you'd like to have a look, it's monitor.civicus.org. So once you log into that URL address, this is the landing page of the CIVICUS Monitor. So what you find on the landing page is this map. So this is the map of the countries that we cover. And as you'll see, the map has different colors, which we shall discuss in the next slides. But here we have the world map. We have our methodology is also here in the explore section, and how it works, and more about us and CIVICUS. And at the bottom left, you see a spectrum of ratings. I will discuss the ratings in the next slides as well. And also, I will also discuss the colors that you see on the map for each particular country. So the map covers the quantitative ratings for 197 countries and territories. Each country has individual reports on civic space. I will show you how one can go about finding the reports of that particular country. And then it's a searchable database of civic space violations. So I will move to the Internet Explorer just so I could show you exactly how this looks like. So this is the website itself as it looks. Here, as you go down, you'll find the latest updates here at the middle here. And you can use the arrow to go further and see what updates have been updated recently. And then, for example, down here in the Find a Country section, you can just put in your country or a country of interest and search it. And then it will provide you with a database of what to find. So I had put here South Africa, which we can have a look at. So this is the country page for South Africa. And then as you go here down below, you'll see all the updates that we've done for South Africa since 2016 when the monitor was developed. So the latest update for South Africa was this one here that was published on 30th of August this year. If you open this update, then you'll find the latest report or the latest update on South Africa regarding civic space. So this is what we had, worrying trends, vilification of civil society and killing of HRDs. We put a picture there, and then we normally begin whenever possible or whenever. Yes?
Excuse me, Sylvia, sorry, we can't see the website on our side. We just see like, yeah, you need to share it on your side. Thank you.
Okay, sorry.
Right.
Let me go back. Okay. Okay. Can you see it now?
Yes, now we can see it. Perfect.
All right. Okay. So this is the landing page of the CIVICUS Monitor website. So as you can see, it has the map that I had shared on the PowerPoint presentation. And as you go down here, you find the ratings page on the ratings on your bottom left. And then as you go below, you'll find the latest updates on the monitor that have been updated recently. So the last update will be the first one, which is Azerbaijan, that was published today. So as you go below, we have this section where you can find a country and type a country of your choice. I will put South Africa there, and then you can use that to search the latest updates on South Africa. This will bring you to the South Africa country page. And then here you can see all the updates that we've done on South Africa since the monitor was developed. And then here you see also the country's rating, which is obstructed. I'll discuss that a bit later. And then below you'll find other activities around South Africa, advocacy and things like that. So I'll go back here to the update section, and you can look at the latest update on South Africa, which is this one, the first one. This was published on 30th August this year. When I click on that, it brings me to this page, which is the latest update on South Africa. So here we have the title, which was the worrying trends, vilification of civil society and killing of human rights defenders. And then as you go below, you'll see here, before we get into the 3 rights that I mentioned before, we have a general update whenever there's something going on in the country, whether political or social context that we want to the reader to have. So here we had the issue of some attacks of some groups, Zimbabwean groups. And then after that, we start with the 3 rights. So we have association, and under association, you see civil society condemning vilification by government officials. And then we have a story on that. And then again, vilification of civil society, again, by representing a local community in court. As you go below, you'll find more incidents that we have reported on. After that, we have this, here we have a peaceful assembly. And then here we reported on the declaration by court against the fees that were being levied on protesters. And yeah, so this is basically how an update looks like on the CIVICUS Monitor. So we have this for all the countries. and this is information that we normally get from our partners. So I'll go back to our presentation. Do you see the PowerPoint, or do I need to share it again?
No, you need to show it again.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, I hope you can see it now.
Yes, we can see it. Thanks.
Okay. Current slide. Yes. Okay. So yeah. So this is the map that we have just discussed, the landing page of the CIVICUS Monitor. So I'll go to the next slide, which is this is just a screenshot of the updates that we have just had a look at right now in South Africa. And then now we can discuss the ratings. As you saw on the map, each country has a different color. And then at the bottom left of the CIVICUS landing page, you saw that we had a short list of ratings, each with its own color. So usually the CIVICUS Monitor has a rating system. So what we do after we get these updates from the partners, this provides us with an evidence base from which, after analysis, normally assists us to rate a country in terms of how it's doing with regards to civic space. So we have 5 ratings, and each country has a specific rating for itself. So the best rating is the open one, which is green, as you can see on the screen. And from the green open rating, we go down below or up until the worst rating that a country can possibly have. So from open, we have narrowed, and then from narrowed we have obstructed. From obstructed we go to repressed. From repressed we go to closed. A country that has a closed civic space rating is a country where civic space is completely closed, and citizens in that country or residents of that country are not able at all to exercise their fundamental freedoms that affect civic space. So these ratings are not permanent. So every year we do an analysis using a methodology that is on our website. If you'd like to read more about the methodology, we look at civil society reports from other international organizations. We look at the updates that our partners have provided during the year, and then we do a thorough analysis at the end of the year. And then this analysis provides us with information of whether a country's rating should change or whether it should remain the same. Currently, we have already begun the analysis for this year. And by December, usually the first week of December, when we are producing the global report on civic space, it normally is accompanied by the new ratings of each country. So I will make a short presentation on what the current ratings are. And this is advised by the previous rating analysis that we did. The last one we did was in December of last year. And this is what the findings were. So this is how people live, basically across the territories that we cover. This is how people are living. Only 3.1% of the general population across the globe is living in countries that are rated as open. And then the next best rating after open is the narrowed rating here. And only 8.3% of the world's population is living under this category. Now, between obstructed, repressed, and closed, which are the bottom 3 ratings, this is where the rest of the world is living. So obstructed rating has 18.4%. Not good to mention South Africa because that's where you're based, as most of us are based in this call, is rated obstructed. And then for the repressed, which is the second last, we have 44.7% of the globe living in these countries. And then closed countries, we have 25.4% of the global population. So if we are looking at civic space from a perspective of these ratings, anything below, between obstructed and closed tends to be quite restrictive in terms of civic space. And a proper combination of these 3 categories brings the total percentage of the world's population as 88.5% of the globe living in very serious restrictions with regards to civic space. In terms of countries, number of countries under these ratings, we have this picture again. We see here the green countries. We have 41 and 39. So the dark green is the open countries, only 39 countries. The light green is 41 countries and living in narrowed. And then this, the heavier side of the metric, you see we have repressed countries, 49 again. Sorry, let me go back. 49, and then 43 is the obstructed, and 25 countries are rated as closed. So again, we go back to the left, we see 117 out of 197 countries are living under serious restrictions of civic space. So another thing that we are able to do with these updates and also with the analysis of the civil society reports from other organizations, we are able to see and do a much better disaggregation of data. And we are able to see which groups are most commonly involved in civic space violations and attacks. So according to the report last year, the analysis we did last year, the most commonly reported groups being involved in civic space were women, followed by environmental rights, followed by labor rights activists, and then LGBTQI+, and then youth. So these are the top 5 categories of groups that keep repeating. We see patterns being repeated most commonly on the CIVICUS Monitor. So if we narrow down to Africa specifically, bearing in mind what we discussed about the ratings and the number of people living in these ratings, under these ratings. So this is how the map of Africa looks on the monitor. We exclude the Northern Africa part of on the map of Africa because we normally do an analysis of this with the MENA region. So that one is covered with the MENA, Middle East and Northern Africa. So for Africa, we cover Africa, which is south of the Sahara. And this is how the map looks like. You will see much of it is orange. We have a few spots of yellow, which is obstructed. And then we also have a few spots of red, which is closed countries. And then in the whole map, we have 2 light green countries. That is Namibia and Ghana, the only 2 countries in the continent that are rated as narrow. You'll see in the whole map, we don't have any country that is written as open in Africa. That means we don't have a country where people are able to fully exercise their rights without any threats to violence or threats to their civil rights. So this is how Africa looks. For South Africa, you'll see here it has the yellowish color, which is obstructed. Good to note that South Africa was previously rated as narrowed up until last year, where it was downgraded to obstructed, following the reports that we documented last year with the protests, violent protests and everything that happened that year. So South Africa dropped one rating to now acquire the obstructed rating. So again, as we are now speaking on Africa, what are the top violations that we are noticing on the monitor? So this on your screen is the top 5 violations. The first one is journalists being detained. A lot of this we see, especially during protests, when they're covering protests, for example, a lot of them face a lot of physical attacks, getting arbitrarily detained, or even sometimes in countries where freedom of expression is extremely curtailed, you'll find journalists being detained, for example, for publishing information or for airing or broadcasting certain TV or radio programs. This is where we notice a lot of these detentions. Number 2, we have censorship. Again, this comes sometimes very blatantly in the form of threats or pulling out or shutting down even media stations, especially radio stations. We see a lot of this in countries, for example, like Burundi. In Rwanda, we see a lot of censorship as well. And censorship comes in very many forms as well. Number 3, we have protesters detained. This is also a very, very big issue in many of the countries in the continent. In Kenya, where I'm based right now, we have a lot of violations around protests and a lot of arbitrary detention of protesters. Number 4, we have attacks on journalists. Again, physical attacks. A lot of it is seen when they're doing their work, and sometimes even during raids on offices, where they're beaten up or just raffled up, sometimes by authorities, sometimes by unknown people. And then lastly, we have protest disruption. This is happening across the continent in very many countries, and especially in obstructed and repressed countries. This is something that we are seeing being a very, very common trend. So every year, even as we continue to do our analysis, we'll get depending on what's happening in the countries, there are times where civic space can drastically decline in a particular country, to the point where we mark those countries as countries where civic space is declining in a way that is faster than usual. Usually because of something that has happened, maybe there's a coup that's going on, some conflict is happening, or maybe sometimes during periods where elections are coming up. These periods usually tend to make a country very vulnerable to drastic declining civic space. And so we have this list that we normally have on the monitor. We call it the watch list. And it's a list that we normally produce every, at least every quarter, between two and 4 times a year. We shall develop a new list to highlight countries where things are really declining really fast because of a situation that's going on in the country. So the last one we published was in August of this year. No, September, sorry. And this is the current list of countries of concern. Again, this is also advised by the updates that we're getting from the partners. And once we have this list, usually we liaise with the advocacy team at CIVICUS. And then we also collaborate with partners who are located in those countries and also our regional partners, so we can be able to escalate the advocacy and communications outputs for this country. At the same time, we normally, this list is designed also to be produced at the same time when the Human Rights Council is sitting in Geneva, and our colleagues in Geneva also produce statements and speak about these countries whenever the sessions are coming up. During what periods do we see restrictions increasing? So the monitor has also been able to identify a few trends. So we have sensitive periods where we see restrictions increasing. And the good thing with these trends is that they also assist with helping to flag or anticipate a country beginning to decline. So for example, the watch list that we just mentioned, if, for example, in previous years, we have seen a country, whenever elections are coming up, we've seen maybe violence or restrictions being increased in that particular country. That previous trend that we have noticed before will allow us to put this country on the watch list, just so that we are aware that anything could happen in that particular country as the elections approach. And with this watch list, where we are just flagging kind of like an early warning system, it enables us also to ramp up campaign around this country, so that we can be able to support civil society in those countries, be able to thwart some of these restrictions. So we see restrictions doubling down in the period of elections. There's some countries here that have listed: Cameroon in 2016, Nicaragua, Hungary, Kenya as well, with the post-election violence that has happened before. And currently, Zimbabwe is on our watch list because of the elections that are coming up next year, and also because we've also been already seeing a lot of restrictions being doubled down in the country. So elections is one area of concern that we've seen a lot of declining. During periods of constitutional changes, we've seen a lot of this in Western Africa, Burundi as well, in Russia, currently as they're trying to get the president to get a third term, and also in Rwanda. Another period that we've seen a lot of this doubling down of restrictions has been issues of protests. As we saw, protest forms one of the top 5 violations in Africa in terms of civic space. And during protests, we have seen some of the worst restrictions and clampdown by authorities. Eswatini is a good example, where the protests that began last year have seen a lot of restrictions from and a lot of violence coming from the authorities. We also saw this in the United States after George Floyd was brutally murdered in the streets. We've seen this with the UK as well, in Sudan, again, also with the constitutional changes, and also in Hong Kong. So protests also present situations that make countries more vulnerable to doubling down of restrictions by authorities. However, despite the doom and gloom that we tend to sometimes, monitor and document, we also have some good news that we also try as much as possible to document on the monitor. So this is just a screenshot of our previous report, where we lifted a few of the good positive cases that we had documented throughout the year. So we have human rights defenders were acquitted. We have documented 5 instances. We have enabling law. Enabling law is laws that were developed that tend to have a positive impact on civic space. So for example, it could be a law decriminalizing, defamation, for example. And then we have positive civic space development. That could be any kind of civic space development that that happens within civic space. There are many in that regards. We have also release of human rights defenders and things like that. So the picture here is of Jamin Rukuki, who's a human rights defender from Burundi, who had been imprisoned by the previous regime, but was eventually released after a lot of campaign by civil society after the new president came in Burundi. So I think this is the final one. This is just more resources on civic space. Each year after the analysis we've done during the whole year, we have the annual global report on civic space, which we call the People Power Under Attack. I invite anyone who's interested to read more about the trends of the year and everything like that. You can go to our website and you'll find this resource covering each region and kind of bringing up the nuances of civic space and the trends, the violations, and also the positive developments of each region are covered in this report. Yeah, so, and thank you. And yeah, so I'll give it back to Danford in case there's any questions, happy to take them.
Thank you for this wonderful presentation, Sylvia. I think it's so straightforward. I've learned a lot, and I really like the way you desegregate the data so that you can analyze it. How it affects how the participation in the civic space is affected by each and every movement. So I've got a couple of questions here. Let me begin with this question. What are some of the challenges you encounter?
Sorry, Danford?
Yes.
I'm sorry, I've got my hand up. I was wondering if you would give me a chance to go because I have to leave early, so I apologize. And I just wondered if it's possible for me to ask my question before I go.
Go ahead, Shona.
Thanks so much. Sorry to cut you off and interrupt you. Sylvia, thanks so much for that presentation. So I just want to tell you that I love this tool of yours, and I send all of my postgraduate students to go and look at it as well. But I feel a little bit confused by, you had a list of 5 reasons, and you had protesters being detained, and then at the bottom you had protest incidents. So in my mind, I'm thinking that if you have the space for protest incidents, if you have a country like South Africa with a lot of protests, surely that means that the democratic space is open for people to be able to go and protest, because you can't pick up a paper in South Africa. Every morning there's a headline about a protest that's happened at community level. And that's because I've interviewed many protesters over the last few years, and pretty much in every sample that I take, I will always get the response that, well, we didn't have a right to protest under apartheid. We have the right to protest now, so we're going to exercise the right. And then there are also some nuances in protests in South Africa, people arguing that it's just actually a site of patronage politics. It's nothing about revolutionary change or transformation. People are not seeking systemic change here. They're just wanting a larger slice of the pie. They're happy with the pie the way it is. So I'm not quite understanding the distinction you're making. So I understand if you have protest and then protesters are detained, and so it kind of narrows the space for people to protest because they know that they're going to be treated with repression, and it's, their actions are going to come to nothing. But if it's a fairly open space where people are protesting regularly, because doesn't that reflect that it is an open civic space? Or perhaps I'm just misunderstanding your the way that you've themed that. So if you could just explain that. Thanks, Sylvia. And thank you. That was really very interesting. Thanks, Danford.
Thanks, Jonah. So I'll take your question. That's a really good question. That's a very good question. So what the monitor does is we try to bring all these things into perspective. It's true what you said. So there's different ways to look at protests. there is a space to protest, which is a positive thing in itself. And then there's the other side, as you put it, where people know that because of the repression that will come, even protesting is completely impossible to do. So the 5 ratings that we have, what we find is the space to protest is available only to a certain extent of the ratings, and this is normally reflected again within the ratings. So, for example, in open countries, of course, it's very open. People can protest and everything. The narrowed rating, again, very open. Usually, people are able to protest. If there is any pushback for narrowed countries, it's normally very minimal. Now, when we come now into the obstructed space, all the way to the closed space, that's where we begin to see a shift. In obstructed countries, the kind of like a paradox with the obstructed countries is that there is space to protest. In fact, there is most usually very accessible to be able to protest. So our definition, if you go to the website and go to the obstructed rating, you'll find that obstructed countries tend to have a very vibrant civil society. So civil society is very outspoken in these countries. People are able to protest. People are able to, come forward with their needs, with their issues. But the only difference with the obstructed country, for example, from the narrow country, is the repression that follows then. So people are allowed to protest, but the repression that comes tends to be quite heavy. If we move to repressed countries, this space begins to continuously narrow. Repressed countries, a lot of times protesting is not that possible. In closed countries, a lot of times we do not even report protests. So for a country like South Africa, for example, the space is open, but the repression that comes after is what now makes it a bit different from the more open countries, for example. So in a narrowed country, the space is there to protest, and the space is there to not fear to protest. But in an obstructed country, the space to protest is there, but the repression that comes is quite heavy-handed. And then that now begins to make the difference between why we place some countries under obstructed and some under narrowed. I don't know if I got your question right and if I've answered that, but please let me know if I need to clarify a bit more.
No, thanks, Sylvia. I get that. That's perfectly sensible. And I messaged Danford to ask if I could be really greedy and ask another question. So this is just a question about your downgrading of South Africa. And I like the way that you use that term downgrading. It's like Moody's downgraded us as well. We just get downgraded. Am I correct in understanding that you say South Africa was downgraded following the July 2021 riots?
So the authorities, what do you call it? Response to the protests. I tend to avoid the word riots because this is normally a legal term that has to be verified, but we do understand that some of them are classified as riots. But for the purpose of this conversation, I'll just use protests. So the heavy-handedness that followed was part of it, but a big part of the downgrading actually came from the killings of human rights defenders, and especially human rights defenders who are involved in issues of mining and extractives. This became a really, really, really big thing that came out in the analysis. And it was also a big issue of discussion we had when South Africa was being reviewed again this year under the UPR mechanism. That's a universal periodic review mechanism at the Human Rights Council. So also the issues to do with human rights defenders also really came to the forefront, leading to the downgrade. So that's, with regards to South Africa, those are the two main issues that led to the downgrade.
Okay, thanks so much, Sylvia. Thank you, Danford, and thank you for allowing me to ask so many questions.
Okay, Shona. There's another question. What are some of the challenges you encounter when rating these countries, and how do you overcome some of these problems? I believe that each and every data collection tool or research tool has its own flaws. If you can share with us some of the challenges that you encounter when rating these countries, and how do you resolve these problems?
Of course, thank you so much for that. So I would say the challenges which we face when we are rating the countries. One is because I would say sometimes we can find information that is inconsistent. So as I mentioned before, the ratings for the ratings we use the information provided by our partners in the periodic reports that they send to us, but we also use a different set of data to come up with the ratings. And for this, we normally use civil society reports from other international organizations. And then we corroborate that also with reports from other regional organizations. And then again, we corroborate that with individual national reports from those particular countries. So we use quite a wide set of data sets to come up with the ratings. And there are many times where you'll find one report is not speaking to another report. And so we have a lot of checking and back and forth that we have to do also with the partners, just to make sure that we are coming up with a rating that is going to be to reflect the correct position with regards to that. And then secondly, also, of course, we'll have some pushback sometimes with some key actors who will not be completely, convinced about a particular rating or a particular rating change. And then, so when this happens, we have to go back and look for reports that can help us to completely get to a solution that is evidence-based. So at the end of the day, we have to go with what the evidence is saying. But by the time sometimes we're getting into, especially for countries where a lot is happening and there's a lot of information that is not consistent, this can pose a challenge, because by the time you get into a decision or an agreement, you have to make sure that it's an agreement that is going to, to be reflected with evidence. And so that can be sometimes a challenge. But usually we are able to go around it, especially because we work very closely with partners who are already either in those countries or in those sub-regions.
Thank you, Sylvia. And another question, is this data in real time? I know in Zimbabwe, for example, there have been over the last 3 days attacks on civil society organizations and those that are in opposition political parties. Is your data able to capture that?
Yeah, that's a good question as well. Unfortunately, it's not completely in real time. And this is because we are just a team of quite a small team of researchers, as we are right now. And also because of how the methodology is structured, we have updates on a country coming up every 2 months. At least we try as much as possible to have it every 2 months. Sometimes it will delay a bit because of extraneous reasons, but usually we try to go every 2 months. So for example, if something is going on in Zimbabwe in the last few days, you will likely not find it unless we do unless a partner requests that we really need to put out an update immediately. But a lot of times you will not find it in real time. You'll probably find it a couple of weeks afterwards. But what we do in countries, as I mentioned before, the list of countries where we have something like a watch list, we try to bring in as much current information so that even if the information is not yet on the update, it will be reflected in the country brief, because we normally develop country briefs for these particular countries. But no, I wouldn't say it's real time all the time. We are not able to completely cover everything as it comes.
Okay, thank you, Sylvia. Let me bring in others. If you've got any question, I'm giving you the platform to, engage with Sylvia. Okay, Pat, I see you've raised your hand. Thank you so much. You can go ahead.
Yes, can you hear me okay? Yes. Thank you, Sylvia. This is a fantastic presentation. Thanks for also showing the real navigation, because I had looked at the map a couple of weeks ago, but I was not sure how to actually make use of it. So that was a very good tutorial there. As as an American citizen who is sort of probably, I would say, quite liberal from my point of view. You know, I appreciate that the United States is not considered at the top of the most open society. What I wanted to thought I might mention a couple of things. I know you have partners bringing data to you. It is a lot has changed, or I shouldn't say maybe less has changed, or maybe it's gotten worse, depending on one's perspective since George Floyd was murdered 2.5 or so years ago. There's lots of civil space by which people are allowed to protest. One thing that I wanted to mention, however, is that because of the sort of attitude or let's say forceful and anger driven, the civil space is often occupied by people who carry military style weaponry, and the civil space is there, all right, technically speaking, but this is kind of akin to, it's almost like a quasi-military occupation these people engage in, as opposed to a national force of law enforcement or police that sort of, break up protests and arrest people and this sort of thing. And I'm curious to how you would, how this influences your research, to basically, a group of people threatening other people, don't come into this civil space here, and should you, we're going to assault you physically. And there have been incidents of this. So I wonder how that is or is not determinative of your ranking or grading system. Thank you.
Many thanks, Pat, for that question. So that's also, that's also a really good one. So what we normally do when documenting violations is, one, we have to also be alive to the fact that the violations don't just come from authorities. We have a lot of cases where the violations or the abuses are coming from either organized groups, or sometimes armed groups that are either carrying are either armed or received or affiliated or received support from government offices or authorities, but not officially, informally. So depending on the country, we normally see these dynamics bringing themselves up in different ways. So in the case of the US, we normally refer to these groups as the anti-rights groups. And these anti-rights groups come in many forms. So as you've mentioned, in the US, it's armed groups that, intimidate others from, occupying the spaces in protest and intimidating them. So what we normally do with the updates, once we have the updates for a particular country, we are able to tag them. So we have these things we call tags. I hope I'll be able to explain it well without the map. To enable us identify trends, and also to enable us identify who the main abusers are, and to enable us also identify the main drivers of the violations. we have this, we normally tag the violations. So for instance, in the case, for example, that you have given on these anti-rights groups, we have tags for non-state actors. And this allows us to see who the violators are. So for us to be able to raise a violation as a civic space infringement, it doesn't necessarily just have to come from the authorities. So even violations that come from non-state actors, we're able to tag this, and this enables us to also have more disaggregated data when we are doing the overall analysis of that particular country. So yes, I would say, how does it affect the rating? We still are able to count this as a violation in itself, only that the actor is the different part of that equation, but it still counts as a violation, because at the end of the day, it might not be the state that is intimidating people from coming to the streets, but as I mentioned earlier, also another thing we look at is how is the state protecting civil society? And so it's up to the state, you know, to prevent this kind of groups from coming to the streets, to prevent people from protesting. So yeah, we do have this in consideration, and yes, it does affect the ratings.
Okay, thank you. I'll take another question from Susan. Susan, you can ask your question.
Thanks, Stanford. And thank you, Sylvia, for your talk. I found it really interesting. I'm coming from kind of outside of this particular field. And so I really learned a lot from this talk, or I unfortunately got here a bit late. I hope my question doesn't overlap with things you've already touched on. But I wanted to know, what have been some of the practical applications of this tool? That's the whole question.
Oh, sorry. I think,
sorry, I'm just wondering. Yeah.
Could you kindly elaborate? I don't know if
No, I'm just wondering. So of course, I think it's really great. It's of course very important to monitor these situations. Yeah. And then I'm wondering, I'm sure that there, you know, different organizations are using this tool, and to monitor these different situations, they're using it for practical purposes as well, where they might, that's a starting off point for actions they may take, or etc. And I'm wondering if you could talk about that a little bit, ways that you know this has been used by your organization or other organizations.
Yeah, thanks, Susan. So the main idea behind the monitor was to provide evidence to allow civil society to make to undertake informed activities around issues in the country that they are acting within. So far, we've had a whole range of information about how the tool is being used, from being used to approaching, you know, government authorities to talk about civic space restrictions by civil society who are in countries where they're able, you know, to have conversations with their governments. We have seen this being used, especially the rating system. We've had donors also being able to use the tool, and especially the rating system, to identify countries that require more intervention by them whenever they have to choose countries. We have had, you know, people make, you know, referring to the monitor when they're trying to, you know, speak about generally on civic space. I can't quite, you know, this would have me going back to our M&E data, but yeah, we've had quite a bit of feedback about how the methodology is being used, and mostly by civil society organizations. When they're undertaking even strategic plans for the organizations, we've had a lot of feedback from them on how they're using the tool to be able to identify the most pressing interventions for the countries they cover. Yeah, I think that is what I could say at the top of my head, but in case you need more, I can always reach out.
Yeah, sure. Thanks very much. No, it's really interesting. I was just trying to think of ways that a similar tool could be used in my own field. So thank you.
Thank you, Sylvia. I think we've come to the end of our session. Thank you so much for making time, you know, to come teach us about this monitor. I find it very useful, and it translates to what is happening on the ground. I know I'm from Zimbabwe, and seeing Zimbabwe on that list, the increase in disturbances towards elections is something that I can actually relate to. So thank you, Sylvia, for this great work that you're doing at CIVICUS. I hope that it will continue, supporting the mobilization of civil society organizations on the ground. Andres, I don't know if you've got any closing remarks.
Oh yeah, no, thank you very much then. Sylvia, it was great learning about the tool and how interesting it is. And thank you very much for sharing with us. And for taking the time to come share with us. I think that's about it from our side then.
Okay, thank you. Thank you everyone for attending this webinar. Please be on the lookout for other webinars. I think we've got 2 more for this year, so we'll send them via emails. Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.